Hi, it's Paul Sackett, Good News Planet, speaking to Jeannie Kerrigan. Hi, Jeannie. How are you?
I'm well. Hi.
Hi. I'm reading the cover of your book. It says, seeping through the cracks in the darkest nights of the soul, you will find the power of resilience and the knowledge of your own true essence. You were born to be good. And it says a must read. And Jeannie's doing very important work. Founder and executive director of an organization that is concerned about training and educating in the classroom and the streets trauma victims, and you're a counselor and a lot of good things here. So the book, Layla, tell us a little bit about your background.
Okay, the book Layla is my autobiography. It's the story of my life, and the first part of my life was really, really dark. But the book, I wrote the book a lot. I was asked to write the book probably 10 years ago. I really needed to wait for my father to not be on the planet. Not that I wished him off the planet, but I really needed for him to not be alive if I ever wrote the book. And he did die, and that's also in the book. You can read the story of his life. It's very much entwined with mine. I was brought up in a sexually abusive home. I was sexually abused by my father from the age of 3. I ran away at 12 and, of course, hit the streets. But in the whole story of all there's, in the thread of all of this is this choice between light and dark. And we started out really dark, and then, of course, the light wins. It always wins. But it's not quite the way you think, in the sense that it's extremely raw. And there's resilience that people can learn from coming through tragedies like these. I walked out of that sexually abusive home into many, many rapes. The story of Ricky, behind this book, I started a nonprofit called Ricky's Revolution with a friend of mine. And I had a little Ricky monkey when I was a runaway on the streets, in and out of all kinds of messes and dangers and deaths and guns and violence, and rape after rape after rape. And so through all this, I had this little stuffed monkey. It was like the bright light in all the darkness. And at the last rape/abduction, I was picked up and put in the back of a truck and taped and beaten and raped. And one of the most amazing things that happened is the muffler blew on that semi-truck.
Right.
So on the highway, the trucker had no choice but to get me out of that truck. So he quickly pulled over the highway. Another truck came out of nowhere, picked me up, and dropped me off in Atlanta, Georgia. Well, by this time I had been raped so many times I was sort of frozen to that, although I was in a lot of pain. What did happen was I had left that Ricky monkey in the truck. And that Ricky monkey was like, my solace. It was my comfort. I was sleeping alone. I was in dangerous situations. And I had left that Ricky. So that's the piece that just about broke me. But when I was writing the book, I didn't break. I held on. There was a woman there at the other end of a phone when I picked it up that came and got me. She took an early lunch break, came and got me and put me in the Salvation Army and really got me cleaned up and safe. So when I was writing this book and I was writing the chapter about Ricky, I had a dream, and I dreamt about my Ricky, that little monkey that I had.
Right.
And on his arms, we had text your city and get an instant safe house. We also have Runaway Hotline, the national hotline that does really good things for runaway on there. We have Domestic Violence Hotline. I was in and out of domestic violence situations where you can get instant help and instant safety. We have the last one would be for RAIN, which is Rape, Abuse, Incest, a national network hotline, who does amazing things in the legislature and for the individuals. So there are these places that people, intact 501c3s that are intact are doing really, really good work, and not a lot of people know that they can get instant help. We have shelter teams that deliver now these monkeys with these life-saving numbers to shelters around the United States, and we have street teams where we actually go out on the streets and we hand out these monkeys, and they're really saving lives. So that was my dream, and so here we are with Ricky, thousands of them.
God almighty. Wow. Zal, thank God you're here to tell this story,
book,
right?
Yeah, the book supports Ricky, and the book has become a handbook for anybody who's in any kind of trauma situation. It's not your typical soap opera, and it's not for the faint of heart. I wrote it raw. I wrote it exactly how it happens. This is how a rape happens. You know, on TV they get to just the part where it's really god-awful. I wrote the god-awful. But I wrote it because all these people who have been victims of any kind of trauma need to have a voice. Everybody who's had trauma needs to have a voice, and this is the voice. So I've had women and men call me and say, oh, my God, you wrote it so well, and coming full circle through the darkness. You know, I'm 100% responsible for my actions. I cannot spend the rest of my life blaming my father. And you know, half the world would justify it and say, well, you have every right to be angry, and I really want people to come all the way through to the other side of trauma in every situation, from your heart all the way out to the community. So that's why we do what we do.
When you talk with a young woman that's, you know, not in a good way, all right, and some of the kinds of things that you're talking about, what do you say to them?
Well, I touch them first.
Okay.
You know, all the words on the planet sometimes don't matter, but how you look at them and how you hold them in your arms and how you hold them in your sight makes a lot of difference. I am that woman, you know. I am that woman who was on the streets, who was raped yesterday, or who's scared to go home because if they're a runaway, but if they go home, it's worse at home, so they'd rather be alone in an alley, shaking from cold. So I touch them first. And then the words that come are the words that they need. But you know, I can say, gosh, I've been there. No, yeah. I mean, the whole idea behind Ricky's arms and why we go there is because we need to touch these people. Does that make sense?
Are you saying physically?
And then
you touch like their shoulder or something?
Oh,
yes. Am I right here?
Here's a story.
Okay.
I have a little boy, my son, who taught me this. We were in the middle of a city, huge city, and there was an old man on the street corner with a pan in front of him. Right. He had no arms and no legs. And I was walking with my son, who was about 6 years old at the time, and he saw that man, and he came running to me, and he said, Mom, help him. Mom, help him. He was desperately upset. And I said, honey, we were in Mexico. And I said, honey, there's nothing we can do except try to love him. And he goes, Mom, no, we're going to take him on the ship, and we're going to bring him back home with us. He was, you know, a kid. But his heart was just in pain from this guy. And I said, baby, and I tried to explain to him, because he was young, what was going on with this man, and somebody was probably watching him and making money off of him. This man was just really, really old and blind and, you know, no arms, no legs, and somebody sat him out there. Well, my son went up to him. He said, fine. He said, if we can't help him, then I'm staying with him. And he walked up to him, sat down next to him, put his arm around him, and sat there for hours, just holding him. Every once in a while, he'd lean over and he'd put his head on his shoulder. And you know what? Ever since then, I said, I know how to help. I watched my son do it. I went with him. I put my hands on that man, and we just gave him all kinds of loving and filled up his cup as long as we were there. My son had no attractions. He didn't go in the ocean. He didn't go swimming. He sat with that man. And so taught me a lot. That's what we do.
You know,
yeah, I touch him.
This is beautiful. You know, Jeannie, we actually started this interview because you were in Santa Fe, New Mexico, and in California. And I had mentioned that in Santa Fe I had visited. There was a famous gentleman. His name was Leo Biscaglia. And Leo's whole thing was hugging. He had a course in UCLA. And note to myself. And it was all about hugging and touching and holding, you know, or it's almost a goose pimple kind of a thing, right? I mean, in a caring, loving, brotherly, sisterly way, right? It's been a big inspiration and a way to help somebody for you. Yeah.
You know, I think one of the things, I mean, again, I'm going to go back to the piece where when you've been abused and when you've been hit and when you've been told you're wrong and you're not okay and you don't belong on this planet, the last thing that we feel inside of ourselves is this potent, beautiful being that we are, and we need to be touched. We need to be seen. People need to be seen. There's such division now. It takes community to change a community. There are 300,000 children in sex trafficking situations on the streets right now in America. 300,000. And the kind of touch and the kind of sight that they're getting is god-awful. It's horrendous. So these kids, when they come through or they come back or we go get them and we find them, it takes community to do that, but they need to be seen over and over and over. They've been programmed to shut their eyes. The society's been programmed to shut their eyes. We've got to change it. I mean, and Leo Buscaglia was an amazing guy, a great guy. And yes, we need to hug each other, but I think it goes deeper than that. We really need to hold the essence of each other, because we are not separate. My Lakota ways have taught me that we are all related, and really, scientifically now they're finding out. We are related. I am you, you are me.
Our currents, our electrical currents from our body, they touch each other. You know what I'd like to do, just because I feel it's the right thing to do? We're going to make this part 1 right now, okay? And what I want to do is this. I'd like to, they have this thing, Skype, or a way to I can visually see you and we can talk both ways. We're setting that up, and I'd like to do part 2 in that manner. I think that would be helpful for the world, if that's okay with you.
Oh, that's totally great with me. Yeah, if we can do things, whatever we can do, let's do it. Yes, I would love it.
Okay, because it's this, we're talking about touching and feeling, and I want people to see you. So we're going to make this part 1, and I don't know how much, people, you've said a lot already. Powerful, important kinds of things here. The book is Layla, and your website is Ricky's Revolution.
The JeannieKerrigan.com website is down, but that's where you can see a little bit more about me. It'll be up soon. I'm learning this whole technology thing. But go to rickysrevolution.org, www.rickysrevolution.org. That's our nonprofit. You can donate there. You can buy a book there. We have people jumping on board. We just had somebody call from North Carolina, and she owns a beauty shop, and she put a whole bunch of monkeys in there to hand out to the women in case they're in a domestic violence situation. So really, any kind of help that we can get. None of my partner and I, her name is Catherine Patton, we take no salary from here. We just go out and do this over and over and over so that we can really change the violence on the planet. So rickysrevolution.org, go there. Amazon.com has Layla.
It's all beautiful. Let me just ask you one last thing here, and this is part 1, and then we're going to get to the video, and we're going to share more of what you're doing. What's good news for you?
What's good news for me?
Yes.
The sun's shining. It's beautiful here. I'm sitting in California, and it's unusually warm. What's beautiful for me is that there are people that get off the streets. What's beautiful for me, let me tell you a story about a prostitute who called me, and she said, Jeannie, I've been on the streets a long time, and I need to tell you, I read your book, and I am running off the streets with your book. I'm going to be okay, she said. I'm going to be okay. That's what's beautiful.
Thank you so much for sharing good news with us, Jeannie. You take care. We'll talk very, very, very soon.
Okay, great. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Jeannie. Take care.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Bye.